Something strange has been happening inside the Cleveland Browns universe, and it's gotten loud enough that even people outside the NFL bubble are starting to notice. When a Hollywood icon and one of the most influential figures in college football both feel the need to step into a media controversy, you know the situation has officially spun beyond the usual sports drama. And the name sitting right in the middle of it all is Shedeur Sanders. For months, fans online have insisted that the narrative surrounding Shedeur never quite matched what they were seeing with their own eyes. Reports kept painting a picture of a rookie struggling to adjust, a quarterback behind the curve, or a young player fighting uphill against the demands of the pro game. But the problem wasn't just the message, it was who that message was coming from. When longtime Browns reporter Mary Kay Cabot made specific claims about Shedeur's readiness and his relationship with Kevin Stefanski, the reaction wasn't disbelief, it was outrage. Suddenly, social media was filled with fans calling the comments misleading, unfair, and completely disconnected from reality. But the real shock came when a familiar voice entered the conversation: Jamie Foxx. His blunt response instantly changed the tone, bringing national attention to a narrative that had mostly lived inside Cleveland. And right behind him came Coach Prime, adding fuel to a fire that was already burning with weeks of frustration. The backlash didn't come out of nowhere. It came from months of rumors, questionable narratives, and a fan base tired of watching their rookie quarterback get overshadowed by storylines they didn't trust. And what happened next would push the entire conversation into territory no one expected. Everything shifted the moment Mary Kay's comments started circulating online. What was supposed to be a routine discussion about Shedeur Sanders' early development inside the Browns system suddenly turned into the opening spark of a controversy nobody saw coming. She spoke confidently, painting a picture of a rookie who wasn't quite up to speed, emphasizing his need to catch up on protections, motions, and the deeper layers of an NFL playbook. On the surface, it sounded harmless, but the tone felt off to a lot of people, almost dismissive, almost as if the narrative was being shaped before Shedeur had a real chance to define himself. Fans didn't just question the report, they pushed back immediately. To them, the comments didn't line up with what they'd been watching or hearing behind the scenes. They saw a quarterback who adjusted quickly, who processed pressure like a veteran, and who handled adversity with a calmness far beyond his years. So when Mary Kay insisted that Shedeur's progress was only happening because of extensive one-on-one sessions with Kevin Stefanski, portraying it as evidence of the coach's unwavering support, the reaction grew even louder. That was the moment the conversation stopped being about football mechanics and started being about credibility. People online began comparing her claims to preseason reports, training camp observations, and even Stefanski's own mixed messaging about the so-called four-way QB competition. Fans argued that nothing about that situation ever felt equal, and hearing a reporter defend it so strongly only added more suspicion. And this is where the spark became ablaze. The idea that Shedeur was being misrepresented didn't stay inside Browns circles. It spread across social platforms, sports forums, and reaction channels. Some viewers felt the comments were exaggerated. Others believed they completely ignored key realities about Shedeur's performance and preparation. And a growing group began suggesting something deeper, that the narrative felt crafted, not observed. Mary Kay had no idea her words were about to trigger one of the biggest fan-driven pushbacks of the season. Because while the debate started small, it was about to attract the attention of people far outside Cleveland. And once that happened, the story took on a life of its own. What happened next caught everyone off guard. It's one thing for fans to push back against a report, It's another thing entirely when a global superstar steps into the discussion without hesitation. Jamie Foxx wasn't tagged, wasn't invited, and wasn't part of any Browns conversation up to that point. Yet the moment he saw Mary Kay's comments circulating online, he reacted instantly. And he didn't tiptoe around it. He didn't soften the blow. He hit the brakes on the narrative with one phrase that echoed across social media: knock it off. Those 3 words were enough to shift the tone of the entire debate. Jamie Foxx is no casual observer. He's a lifelong football fan, deeply connected within sports circles, respected by players, coaches, and celebrities across multiple industries. So when he speaks on a topic, people pay attention. His reaction wasn't dramatic or drawn out. It was precise, sharp, and clearly aimed at shutting down what he believed was an unfair portrayal of Shedeur. And the internet exploded. Within minutes, clips of Mary Kay's original interview were being shared alongside Jamie Foxx's response. Fans started pulling receipts, analyzing tone, and dissecting every detail of the situation. Some viewers felt validated, as if a major public figure finally said what they'd been thinking for weeks. Others were shocked that the narrative had reached a point where a Hollywood icon felt compelled to intervene. But the most interesting part was what Jamie didn't say. He didn't attack, accuse, or claim insider knowledge. He simply dismissed the narrative in a way that suggested he recognized something off about it. That subtlety made the impact even stronger. It wasn't a rant. It wasn't a lecture. It was a check, a reminder that not everyone was buying the story being pushed. And just when the internet thought the moment had peaked, it escalated again. Because someone else saw Jamie's comment and decided to weigh in. Someone whose voice carries even more weight when it comes to anything involving Shedeur Sanders, Coach Prime. The second he stepped into the conversation, the narrative transformed from a media debate into a full-blown public confrontation. And that's when people realized this wasn't just a storyline. It was becoming a movement. The moment Coach Prime stepped into the conversation, everything changed. Jamie Foxx calling out the narrative was already a shock, but Coach Prime adding his voice turned a growing debate into a full-scale reckoning. He didn't write a paragraph. He didn't start an argument. He simply co-signed Jamie's message with a quick, pointed response that said everything without saying much at all. It was subtle, but the internet understood exactly what it meant. For months, fans had been frustrated by how Shedeur was being talked about in NFL circles. Every time he outperformed expectations, a new storyline popped up to downplay it. Every time he showed progress, someone tried to shift the focus to something negative. So seeing Coach Prime support Jamie Foxx's dismissal of the narrative felt like the confirmation many fans had been waiting for. It wasn't just outsiders questioning the report anymore. It was the 2 people who arguably knew Shedeur best, his father, and a longtime admirer of his work ethic. Coach Prime's response also carried historical weight. Throughout Shedeur's journey, from Jackson State to Colorado and now the NFL, he's watched critics underestimate his son at every stage. He's heard the whispers about talent, about competition level, about football IQ. And each time, Shedeur silenced the noise on the field. So when Mary Kay's comments suggested he was behind the curve or struggling to absorb information, it hit a nerve not only with fans, but with those who had seen Shedeur prove that narrative wrong repeatedly. The public read Coach Prime's response as more than agreement. They saw it as a direct message. Enough is enough. A reminder that criticism is one thing, but misrepresentation is another. And because Coach Prime rarely inserts himself into media debates unless the situation demands it, people took his involvement seriously. Within hours, the conversation spread beyond Browns fans. Other NFL communities began weighing in, analyzing what sparked the response and questioning whether this was part of a larger issue with how certain rookies are portrayed. What started as a single interview clip had now become a national discussion fueled by two high-profile voices. And while the celebrity reactions drew the headlines, what came next forced everyone to look deeper into the story, because fans had receipts, and they weren't afraid to bring them out. Long before Mary Kay's comments sparked outrage, there was already a lingering frustration surrounding one specific storyline. The so-called four-way quarterback battle the Browns claimed would define their offseason. On paper, it sounded competitive, open, and fair. But very quickly, fans began noticing cracks in that narrative. The reps didn't match the hype. The rotation didn't reflect a true competition. And Shedeur Sanders, the quarterback many wanted to see showcased, wasn't receiving the same opportunities as the others. That's when people started asking a simple question. Was this really a four-way battle, or was it a predetermined decision disguised as one? Throughout camp, fans kept pointing out how Shedeur's practice clips looked sharper than expected. His timing improved. His reads became quicker. His confidence grew. Yet when it came to first-team reps, observations suggested he was barely getting a fraction of what had been promised. Even casual viewers recognized something wasn't adding up. So when Mary Kay later insisted that Shedeur's rapid development was solely because of extra one-on-one sessions with Kevin Stefanski, framing it as proof that the coaching staff was deeply invested in him, the reaction was immediate. Fans felt the narrative ignored the biggest issue. Shedeur never received a true shot in the competition many believed he could have won outright. Online discussions began resurfacing old comments, highlighting inconsistencies, and questioning why a rookie outperforming expectations didn't receive equal footing. Some fans claimed the competition felt scripted from the start. Others believed the media downplayed Shedeur's growth to protect the original storyline. And for many, the lack of first-team reps became the most convincing evidence that the four-way battle was more marketing than reality. But the turning point came when early preseason stats and practice reports leaked through fan channels. According to those discussions, Shedeur's numbers didn't look like those of someone trailing behind. They looked like someone who was closing in fast, maybe even surpassing expectations that were set far too low. In that moment, the debate shifted from frustration to suspicion. If Shedeur performed this well with limited access, what could he have done with a fair, fully open competition? And if the media narrative didn't reflect what fans were seeing, who was shaping the story? Those questions didn't fade. They only grew louder. And the next part of the controversy would push the entire conversation to a boiling point. As the season unfolded, something became impossible to ignore. The numbers didn't match the narrative. While certain reports continued pushing the idea that Shedeur was a slow learner or a quarterback trying to catch up, his on-field performance told a completely different story. Every time the Browns gave him snaps, he responded with poise, precision, and a level of control that you simply don't see from most rookies. And fans noticed immediately. They watched him read defenses like a veteran, adjust protections under pressure, and deliver throws with a calmness that silenced entire stadiums. It didn't look like improvisation. It didn't look like a rookie guessing his way through plays. It looked deliberate. It looked practiced. It looked earned. That's why the disconnect between production and media coverage became such a major point of frustration. Instead of highlighting how quickly Shedeur adapted, some analysts stuck to old talking points, questioning his readiness, his processing, even his football background. Meanwhile, every measurable indicator painted a completely different picture. Then came the weekly honors. Shedeur earned Rookie of the Week recognition, and fans treated it like confirmation of everything they had been arguing for months. But instead of celebrating his moment, many felt another punch to the gut when he wasn't heavily considered for Rookie of the Year. The disappointment wasn't about awards, it was about what the snub represented. Fans believed it showed how deeply the initial narrative had rooted itself into national perception. Online discussions grew louder. People compared his stats to other rookies, analyzing completion percentages, turnover ratios, and efficiency under pressure. Over and over, Shedeur's numbers held up, sometimes even stood above the rest. So when a report tried to minimize his accomplishments or suggest his progress was slower than expected, fans saw it. Yet another attempt to fit him into a storyline he had already outgrown. For many, this wasn't just about football anymore. It was about fairness, it was about respect, and it was about the growing belief that Shedeur wasn't being portrayed accurately, that the public was being asked to accept a version of his development that didn't reflect reality. And just when the debate seemed to settle into a pattern, the conversation shifted again. This time towards something even bigger than stats, reps, or awards. It shifted to the one issue that fans felt no one in the media wanted to address directly. As the conversation grew louder, it became clear that the controversy wasn't just about one report or one questionable narrative. It tapped into something deeper, a growing frustration with how certain members of the sports media operate, how stories are framed, and how quickly misinformation can shape public perception. Fans weren't simply pushing back against a single. As comment from Mary Kay, they were pushing back against a pattern they'd seen for years. Many felt that access and credentials had become shields, allowing certain voices to push narratives without facing real accountability. When a reporter with decades of experience made claims that didn't align with what fans believed they were seeing on the field, trust took a hit. And when those claims were repeated on major platforms, framing Shedeur in a less favorable light, the frustration became impossible to contain. What truly fueled the outrage was the contrast. Fans saw independent creators, small reporters, and digital channels grinding for access, doing their homework, and presenting balanced analysis without the luxury of insider status. Yet those people often struggled to get the same opportunities that established reporters could seemingly use to shape narratives without question. To many, it felt backward, like the people closest to the story weren't the ones telling it most, honestly. Then came the moment Janie Foxx and Coach Prime reacted. Their involvement exposed just how wide the gap had grown between the stories being pushed and the stories fans were willing to believe. And instead of calming the situation, the media responses that followed only added more tension. Some outlets doubled down. Others ignored the backlash entirely. But fans weren't letting this one go. Across social platforms, the conversations shifted from disappointment to determination. Threads filled with examples of stories that felt exaggerated or incomplete. People questioned how narratives are formed, who benefits from them, and why certain players, especially rookies like Shedeur, seem to face harsher scrutiny than others. It wasn't just that trust was fading. It was that fans were finally vocalizing it. They wanted transparency. They wanted accountability. And they wanted reporters who covered the team to reflect what was actually happening, not what fit an outdated or convenient storyline. And just when the debate seemed to reach its peak, the internet did what it always does. It dug deeper. Suddenly, the entire spotlight shifted back onto Mary Kay, and the conversation became impossible to ignore. As the conversation snowballed, something unexpected happened. The focus shifted from Shedeur's development to the person who had helped ignite the entire controversy. Suddenly, Mary Kay found herself in the center of a spotlight she didn't control, and fans were no longer treating her comments as harmless analysis. They were treating them as part of a larger pattern, one they were determined to expose. Social media threads began filling with screenshots, old quotes, and clips from past interviews. Fans weren't just reacting emotionally. They were building timelines, comparing narratives, and pointing out moments where her reporting seemed to contradict the team's actions or Shedeur's. Results: it wasn't about attacking her personally, It was about questioning the consistency and fairness of the stories she'd been presenting. Memes began circulating, not to mock her, but to highlight how quickly the narrative had unraveled once Jamie Foxx and Coach Prime weighed in. People dug up earlier claims about the four-way QB battle, pointing out how the competition never looked balanced from the outside. Others reposted segments where Shedeur's progress was downplayed despite evidence that he was improving at a rapid pace. The tone wasn't playful, it was investigative. And then came the turning point. Fans began asking why someone with that level of access wasn't providing a more accurate reflection of what was happening inside the building. They wondered why independent creators seemed more aligned with reality despite having far fewer resources. Some even questioned whether certain narratives were shaped to protect team decisions rather than report them honestly. These were big claims, rooted in frustration, but they showed how deeply fans cared about fairness in coverage. Mary Kay didn't respond publicly, but her silence only intensified the conversation. People interpreted it as avoidance, even though she may have simply chosen not to feed the controversy. Still, the absence of clarification allowed the debate to evolve freely, and fans kept pushing the narrative forward. The controversy had officially outgrown its starting point. What began as a disagreement over Shedeur's progress had transformed into a broader conversation about trust, transparency, and how much power the media holds in shaping a player's public image. And as the dust settled, one thing became clear. This wasn't just a story about Shedeur Sanders anymore. It was a story about the future of sports journalism and whether fans would ever trust it the same way again. By the time the dust settled, it was clear this situation had grown far beyond a single interview clip or one reporter's perspective. What started as a simple conversation about Shedeur Sanders' development evolved into a full-scale examination of how narratives are built, whose voices shape them, and why certain players end up fighting battles off the field before they ever get a chance to prove themselves on it. And the more people paid attention, the more they realized this wasn't just about the Browns. It was about the shifting landscape of sports media as a whole. Shedeur became the center of a conversation much larger than him. A conversation about fairness, accuracy, and the responsibility that comes with covering athletes in an age where every word can spread to millions in seconds. Jamie Foxx stepping in wasn't just a celebrity reaction, it was a sign that people outside the NFL bubble were seeing something wrong in the way this story was being told. And Coach Prime adding his voice only amplified the message. The old way of shaping narratives without pushback is disappearing. Fans aren't passive anymore. They're informed, connected, and unafraid to question what they're being told. They compare clips, track stats, analyze tone, and call out contradictions. In this case, they watched a rookie perform beyond expectations, and when the coverage didn't reflect that, they pushed back until the conversation could no longer be ignored. Mary Kay became the focal point, but she wasn't the real issue. She was simply the latest example of how quickly trust can break when the story doesn't match the evidence. And while she may not have intended harm, the reaction revealed how deeply fans care about accurate, unbiased storytelling, especially when it involves a young player still carving out his identity. In the end, this entire controversy raised one lingering question. Who gets to define the truth in modern sports media? Is it the reporters with decades of access? The fans who watch every snap? The players who live the reality? Or the unexpected voices like Jamie Foxx who step in when something feels off? That's the conversation that will continue long after this moment fades. Because if this saga proved anything, it's that fans aren't just consuming the story anymore. They're shaping it. And as Shedeur continues his journey, the world will be watching to see which narrative rises to the top. The one people try to push, or the one he writes for himself.